That is James Mennie over at the Montreal Gazette. And Jim, I guess we should follow up what you were talking about the other day. That was Francois Legault's posting on social media about how his mom had to, dole out money, had envelopes, and all of a sudden he goes from, I guess, that regular reference of Mon Oncle to Eric Girard now playing what, the bad guy in the Legault government, saying they're not going to be sending out any more checks.
Well, it's kind of funny, but I use the expression, he's going to be the bad cop. Legault's going to be the good cop.
Right.
As far as I can remember, all the other announcements about checks being handed out came from Legault. If I'm wrong, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure. I think it's been a total of $1,500 over several announcements, and it was always Legault at the presser. Now all of a sudden, here's Eric Girard, who is not a disliked member of cabinet. But when you see his face on the webpage of La Presse first thing in the morning, fini l'échec, and going on to say that we're not going to be doing this anymore. We have other ways to deal with the challenges, the economic challenges facing Quebec. We're going to be focusing on housing, on homelessness, and adapting to climate change. It's described as the three priorities of the finance minister, which I find rather interesting because we do have a minister of housing. We do have a minister who's responsible for the issues of homelessness. And we do have an environment minister. But all of a sudden, here's this rather, sober kind of no nonsense here. This is what we're going to be doing. And I suspect, one, because this is what the CAQ always does, they are rebuilding a new narrative. One element of that narrative is going to be you'll be hearing more from Eric Girard because I have a sneaking suspicion this is a government that, after sort of like hiding behind its little stockade, trying to protect Quebec from the identity invaders, realizes they've got to roll up their sleeves and get some work done. That it's not impossible that we will slide into a recession, even a minor one. And the bottom line is this caucus, most of this caucus and this party is, among other things, supposed to represent Quebec's economic future, to have the best plans. And in fact, we're seeing that, and the opposition is turning around saying, these guys are all frosting and no cake. They talk a good game, but in the bottom line, when they got to deliver, the goods simply aren't there. So a lot of things that I would expect Francois Legault to be saying were said today by Eric Girard. It's not, I don't think they're in panic mode. But I think we are seeing a kind of, a transformation. Maybe, when the porcupine sort of goes into a semi ball and the quill starts showing up, they may be taking a defensive stance right now because they realize they're not entirely sure which way the economy is going to go, and it's out of their control anyway. And certainly, I don't know about you guys, but that interesting breeze I felt at about 10:05 this morning was probably the entire province heaving a sigh of relief that the prime rate didn't go up. But the fact remains there are a lot of challenges for this government. This government is vulnerable on a multitude of issues, and it's interesting to see this new face, relatively speaking, and this new voice essentially telling you how things are going to be over the, in the midterm. And normally that has always been Francois Legault's job. I think it's a very interesting development.
Yeah, sure. I can't help but question why they were doling out those checks in the first place. I mean, it was so self-serving. And
that would be the answer, wouldn't it? For just that reason, got him elected.
Aaron, I was about to say, to ask the question is to answer.
Exactly.
As we say in these parts. But yeah, that's exactly what it was.
But did you get the sense the other day when we were talking to Jim that Legault gave the impression that there were more stimulus checks coming in that little social media missive that he put out, Jim, or not?
No, I got the impression that, we have to be careful. Like my mom back in the 60s with her little envelopes, one for the house payment, one for the groceries. We're going to have to understand we have to live within our means.
Right.
And it wasn't, and I'm telling you guys, I'm not a fan of Legault, but it was a very cleverly worded, structured kind of change of tone. But it was the good cop change. He wasn't turning around saying, listen, we got to stop messing around here where we're going to be in big trouble. And that wasn't necessarily the tone that Girard took in his interview. But I'm telling you guys, it's clear that there is a deeper shift going on within the party. I don't know if they're getting, they're setting the table because they have their big hoedown coming up, pre-session hoedown. for the CAC, and maybe they want to sort of get all the newbies, get the caucus in line and say, listen, yeah, we've been this way before. We used to freak out over sort of like things that appeal to Journal de Montréal columnists, but it's time to get down to business. And also, I really think they are trying to perhaps convey an image of competence, of managed expectations. If they lose up in Jean Talon next month, it's going to be more than embarrassing. It won't mean a damn thing in terms of political effectiveness. But once again, it's the kind of thing that people will leap upon. It's going to hang on the CAC like a stain if they lose a riding that they in fact succeeded in stealing from the Liberals. But I really think that this may be the first of a series of announcements that you're going to hear of that are less pie in the sky, less solidaire, less, it's us against the world, that may have a little more, tempered a little more with some realism about where Quebec is, the fact that we are part of a global economy, and there are certain things we simply can't control, so let's control the things we do.
Wouldn't it be refreshing if they just said, hey, we blew it, we shouldn't have been doling out all your own money to you?
Yeah, that's going to happen.
Anyway, what about Pierre Fitzgibbon announcing 3 years ahead of the game that he's not running again? What do you make of that?
Oh, I never took him to be a long-term player. I don't mean this as a slight against Mr. Fitzgibbon. We certainly owe him a huge debt of gratitude for all the content he's given this show. but the reality is he's a business guy.
Yeah.
And I think maybe his legacy, he hopes, will be the transformation, so to speak, of Hydro-Quebec into, how can I put it, a less independent, more on-side revenue provider for the province. I mean, Hydro-Quebec has always had the idea that Hydro-Quebec is what steers us through the hard times. And now here we are talking about how we might be short on electricity. I've lived here all my life. I've never heard that until like maybe 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Via Mr. Fitzgibbon. But people come and people go. Lest we forget, in the first time that the CAC formed the opposition, you will recall that Christian Dubé resigned, and he went to work for the Caisse de dépôt. He resigned like 2-3 months into his term, and he went to work for the Caisse, and then he came back.
I'd forgotten that.
Is there's going to be the same kind of value again with Pierre Fitzgibbon? I don't think so. I've interviewed the guy, I think, twice in my life, and I really he gives you the impression of being, because I know you guys have interviewed him on the phone, he gives you the impression of a guy who's always on his way to someplace else. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, and that's
you're really all I can say. But yeah, I am not surprised by this. But once again, it's talk about wiggle room. He's got like another 3 years to change his mind.
Well, that's the kind of weird part. I mean, typically, a guy decides not to run. You do that before an election. Why give 3 years notice?
He's probably got more ethics issues.
Yeah, but why now? Not saying he's going to stay, but why give notice now?
Listen, nothing happens. Everything happens for a reason in politics. Is he setting the table for a precipitous departure, saying, I've thought about it, and I don't think I can. It would be unfair for me and my constituents for me to continue the entirety of my term.
Oh, come on. He's got a business deal brewing that's going to put him in a position that it's going to cause ethics issues.
But he does
I'm
those
sure.
anyway, whether they cause ethics issues or not. So what's the difference, right?
Right?
Okay. Jim, thank you. James Mennie. Thanks.